Hello, I'm Brian Dowdy, conductor of the Minnesota Philharmonic Orchestra. Like so many ensembles, we canceled much of our season in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. One of the pieces we were particularly excited to share with you in our May concert is by Duluth-based composer Mina Kaiser. The piece is called Tombow and Rainbow. It's a concerto for flute, alto recorder, and string orchestra, and it deals with the disproportionately high rates of suicide and homicide in the transgender community. We were certainly looking forward to sharing Mina's work with you and to sharing the stage with the soloists who premiered that work, Shelley and Johanna Gruskin. We look forward to inviting them back soon. In the meantime, I was able to talk with Mina about her life in music and about this work. So I hope you enjoy the following interview. I especially hope you enjoy listening to Tombow and Rainbow. You can do so by following the link below or by checking out our YouTube channel. The recording features the Lake Superior Chamber Orchestra and soloists Shelley and Johanna Gruskin. Thank you and take care. Well, thanks for taking the time today to talk with us about your background and your music. We're really excited to be doing this with you, especially since we weren't able to perform your piece Tombow and Rainbow, and we of course are looking forward to performing that and perhaps other pieces you wrote in the future.
Oh, I hope so.
Yeah. So maybe we can start just by learning a bit about your musical background, when you started playing an instrument, what your instrument is, when you started composing.
All right. When I was about 12, my mother's parents retired and moved to Arizona. And my grandfather used to play a tenor guitar. So that's tuned like a viola. But he would usually tune it to an open chord tuning and play it with a slide. And he was Swedish, so he sang Swedish folk songs with the thing. I don't know why I ended up with it, but I did. And I just kind of took to it, but I tuned it like a baritone ukulele,
Oh.
which is, just like the first four strings of a regular 6-string guitar. And I have 4 older brothers, and they've all played guitar in some fashion or other instruments too. And my oldest brother worked as a radio announcer for WDTH in Duluth at the university. And he gave me all sorts of records and tablature books, particularly, of all things, ragtime blues guitars from the 20s and 30s. So that's what I first learned how to play. And then shortly after, one of my other brothers found a guitar in a pawn shop, and he wanted to buy it but didn't have the money, and I happened to have saved my allowance, so I loaned him the money. A beautiful old archtop from the 1930s. And so I loaned him the money, and after a while, he got a job, but he thought, what, I bet you could use this guitar. So he said, why don't you keep it? And so I did, and I still have it. I have had work done on it since then to restore it and to convert it to an electric. So when I do like big band gigs or pit orchestra gigs, I often use that guitar for that kind of music. And about the same time, so I'm still 12, 13 years old, I also went to symphony concerts a lot with a friend in junior high school. And that way I got exposed to classical music a lot. And I thought, boy, I love this stuff, but I knew it wasn't really a guitar thing. So I went to the band director in my junior high, and he said, I'd like to play, but I don't know what. And he started listing bassoon, bari sax, and so on. And he said horn. I said, oh, I love the horn. So he checked out a school instrument, and I started learning French horn. And that's how I learned how to read staff notation. And also it got me into studying orchestral scores and transposition and all of the stuff for notation and that sort of thing. And I transferred that knowledge to the guitar because I didn't have a guitar teacher. I was all just from books and self-taught. And so what got me into composing was thinking, uh, well, if I can't find music, I don't have a teacher. I couldn't afford one anyhow back then. I'll make my own. Necessity's the mother of invention, you know. So I did a lot of early things that were just emulating the ragtime blues stuff I was learning. And then also I started reading orchestral scores from the horn experience. So I was bringing home Beethoven and Mozart and stuff like that and trying to transcribe it. And also with that, learned that so much of the classical guitar repertoire has transcriptions in it. And so I also developed an interest in early music rather early on. And I had lots of encouragement from my brothers and my teachers in school. And so I eventually went to St. Olaf to become a composition major. And not long after Reagan was elected, the Pell Grant program got slashed. I had a free ride to finish college down there, but it was a combination of scholarships and government grants. So I transferred up to St. Scholastica in Duluth, where I was born and still live nearby. And that was fortuitous, I would say, because at the time, the school was very much one of the leading schools for early music in the United States. And that's how I got to meet Shelley Gruskin and studied all of his courses. And he's commissioned me to write a number of things over the years. Also, it's when I started learning how to write grants and things like that. So I became a composer in residence a little while after I graduated with Lake Superior Chamber Orchestra up here. And that's kind of what's kept me going, is just having a group to write for.
Yeah, you mentioned blues guitar as one of your influences early on. What would you say are some of the other influences? You mentioned early music. What are some of the other influences that made their way into your early writing?
Oh, very eclectic. My parents listened mainly to like polkas and country western, but we had a lot of old like Johnny Cash and Hank Williams albums, and even older things. And then my oldest brother, the one who gave me all of those blues books, he that part of the family, he's a half brother technically, but we're all part Finn and Swede, and he's gone and done all the family research, and he's gone back to Finland and Sweden, and he's very into the Nordic music, so he's also brought that into my life. Like he plays kantala, nickel harpa, and my so I said four older brothers. The second oldest one, he's really into electric guitar and old rock like Led Zeppelin and Beatles and Pink Floyd and stuff like that. And the next brother played in a lot of country bands and sort of country rock stuff. So there's a lot of influence of these divergent styles. And then my brother closest in age, we used to play together in like coffee houses and such when I was in high school, and we would do a mix of original folk songs that he wrote, kind of John Denverish, and Django Reinhardt,
Oh yeah.
and bluegrass, and we'd both arrange things. But I'm the only one who was really classically trained, so it's a lot of a mix-up of what my brother's influenced me with at first. And then when I went into college, I really wanted to learn everything I could. So as a composer, I took up all of the instrumental methods classes that an educator would normally do to teach middle school or something. But I did it with the mindset of learning how the instruments work to be able to write for them well. So, boy, it's all over the map. This brother that I used to perform with a lot, what he does now is he got a cat here bothering me. He makes his own electronic instruments. He like goes to rummage sales and buys old toys like a Speak and Spell or a Tickle Me Elmo or something, and he takes a circuit board out and builds it into a new housing with voltage control oscillators and things to make like mini synthesizers and pedals. And plus he uses found objects. So there's been a lot of electronic influence too. I don't write stuff like that now. I did some time ago. But just the whole approach of different influences of types of instruments and different cultures. I mean, a lot of it's Western influence, of course, but I'm fascinated by everything.
Yeah. So what composers or performers, be they classical or otherwise, would you say you most admire or love or are influenced by today?
Gosh, there's so many. I play a lot of instruments, and sometimes it's been out of necessity just to make a buck, and other times it's just because I've wanted to learn. So in terms of early guitar, I would have to say of the Vihuela composers, Milan and Modara particularly, but I like them all. And along with that, of that time period, Milano, Francesco Canova de Milano. A little later, I have actually a bunch of different early guitars. There's a local builder who makes fine instruments, and I have a Stradivarius replica of a Baroque guitar.
Oh, cool.
And also a few of his other instruments, of the Vihuela and Theorbo and a Milanese mandolin. And for the Baroque guitar, I especially love Bartolotti. Thinking more classically, I've been kind of on a kick with Thor lately, just playing through all of his fantasies. In part, I mentioned the cancer in our emails. Weird thing. So part of my tongue had to be removed and replaced with part of my forearm. And so I've got my hand back pretty well. But as therapy, I've just been picking repertoire to inspire me, and I've always liked Thor. But all of that time period and repertoire of the really romantics I like. Orchestrally, I have favored Beethoven a fair amount when I was young. But I kind of like more of the early 20th century if I were really going with what I listen to the most. Like Mahler or Bruckner or something, and Stravinsky, Debussy. Also a fan of Shostakovich a little later. And the experimental nature of a lot of composers also very appealing. Varese or Ligeti, I think that's Ligeti is right. And even Cage. So many people.
Yeah, right. Hard to choose. Yeah. Well, as a guitarist myself, I love to hear both the names of some of the composers we know for their orchestral writing, and also some that we, of course, know for their guitar
Uh,
writing, for the lute, and these other early plucked instruments. Um, it's really wonderful, wonderful, and I hope that our audience, when they watch this, I hope they haven't heard of some of those names, and they
oh
know,
yeah, it'd be nice for them to look into it.
yeah, dial up some Milano, or, whatever, and get to know that music. There's a great intimacy to that music. I think that's in some ways perfect for
Yeah.
time when we're all at home. Um, so before the pandemic hit us, the MPO was, of course, to perform your Tombow and Rainbow just a few days from now. And we really hope to program that again very soon. But in the meantime, I wonder if you can tell us a bit about the piece, both musically and in terms of its subject matter.
Sure. Um, so I mentioned Shelley Gruskin at Scholastica. He's commissioned a number of works from me over the years. And uh, previous to that particular piece, he had asked me to write a couple of pieces for his daughter Johanna, who's an excellent flute player. Plays with the New World Symphony in Florida, or did. I don't know if she still is. And just got a principal position somewhere, like Kentucky or something. But in any event, I heard they were going to be programmed to do the Telemann Concerto for Flute and Recorder. His recorder is really Shelley's instrument. And so I thought, great. And I talked to the conductor of the chamber orchestra, Warren Creason, because he's supported me writing for them for so long, and said, I'd love to do something for these two. And we planned originally for, I think, 2016 summer season, because they normally just do summers. And they didn't get the funding to do all the concerts, or something came up, I forget what. But in any event, it got postponed. And all I knew originally is that, well, I still have a green light to write a concerto for these two, just will be done later. And then the following season, he did get funding, but his programming for all the other concerts, he was thinking of having all women composers, or pieces that dealt with women's issues. And he asked me specifically to do one with a transgender theme, I guess because I am. And I wouldn't have chosen that sort of orchestration to start. I probably would have done more just a chamber orchestra and a lot of different colors, but I really wanted to write for Shelley and Johanna. So I figured I'd make it work. And I hadn't started anything yet either. So initially it was trying to make this peg fit in the right size hole. And so I came up with the notion of representing some trance themes with the three movements of the concerto. So the first two movements are both tombeau, which is French for a tombstone, a big part of the Baroque lute repertoire. In the Baroque guitar, there's only one piece, which I actually quote a little bit from, that's a tombeau. And normally it's an Allemande movement that's meant to honor some patron or other famous musician of the time. So I borrowed in part of the tombeau of Robert de Vizet, Baroque guitarist, which honored his predecessor, Corbetta. And both of them played for Louis XIV, where the French connection is, not the movie. And I mean, the first two movements being tombeaus, that seemed a little bit of a downer, and I wanted it to end more positive. So that's where the third movement comes in as the rainbow. And I started actually with the rainbow idea and used elements of it to create motives for the first section especially. So the first Tombow reflects how many trans people are victims of hate crimes and violence, and it's not because they've done anything except just be trans. And the second Tombow represents the ridiculously high suicide rate among trans people, which is largely due to the violence. And then the hopefulness of the third movement is the rainbow, as in the symbol of hope from the Old Testament, and also it's the colors of the LGBTQ, etc. flag. So starting with that rainbow idea, I thought, well, the 7 colors of the rainbow. So it's in 7 sections in a rondo form. It uses 7/8 time for the majority of it. It's got a fugue in it, which I'll come back to in a moment. And generally just wanted it to be a very happy, cheerful sort of piece. So part of that 7 was also quoting the Magnificent Seven theme from the movie, just a little bit. So I used some of the rhythm of that as the basis for rhythm in the first movement. Also in the first movement, well, both the Tombows, there's a funereal aspect to it. And the first movement makes the most quotations, I would say. It has this opening chord, which I like to find lots of what I think of as musical metaphors. So the first chord is got this low C, and if you take each note above that note, it's a consonant. But if you take every possible consonant above that low note, it creates this dissonant clustery chord. And I thought that just kind of captured the absurdity of how people should be able to get together, sound good together, but they don't. And also kind of capturing this tension of like a scream of fleeing for your life, basically. And then it also quotes that tombow I mentioned of Debussy, but tombows in general are this allemande movement of a Baroque suite. So it has a lot of those rhythmic elements. And then also a lot of funeral type pieces. They're in C minor, so it favors that tonality. And the pavane rhythm is another part of this. If you listen to the Beethoven's 7th Symphony, for example, that has the pavane rhythm, but that goes way back to Renaissance, again, early music. And that's another part of all of this. I wanted to honor Shelley with having early music references. Besides him commissioning me to write pieces, I've performed with him in a lot of different contexts, including on natural horn and early orchestra and recorders and other things. Anyhow, so the end of the first movement, almost or close to the end, there's a cadenza for the 2 soloists, and it's a fugue. And the word fugue is related to the word refuge, as in take flight. And in this context, it's fleeing from danger and threats to your life, basically. And I use that fugue idea in the rondo, which I'll come back to. Second movement is related to the high suicide rate of trans people. And kind of the quintessential opera aria of suicide is Dido's Lament from Purcell's opera. And so I used the ground, the bass line of that aria as my source for the variations. And like a ground, it's like you can put different harmonies and melodies above it, but you keep repeating that bass line. So that is the origin of that structure. And then there's a little bit of what I consider a mannerist sort of thing I do when I compose sometimes. It's imagine if you broke a mirror into a bunch of different sized pieces. And so you see a reflection of something in each of those pieces, but it's a different size or it's somehow different because of the broken glass. So it's like using the same motive or theme, but changing its size and shape a little bit because of how you're hearing it, but doing it all at once, like when seeing all the glass on the floor. And then I mentioned that fugue idea. The same fugue subject is used as a cadenza again in the rondo, but this time in a major mode, happier feeling with the 7/8 cheerful rhythms. And this time taking the meaning of taking flight as a happy thing, like birds flying, like freedom to express yourself. Trans people sometimes use the terminology gender dysphoria and gender euphoria. And so the dark things are really the tones are the dysphoria, basically. And the euphoria is finding acceptance and being happy in your life.
Wonderful. Wow. Well, I certainly can't wait until we can bring all of that that you just discussed in its musical form to our audiences. And I've of course had the privilege of hearing a recording of the piece, um, and hearing all that richness really come to life in tone. And that being said, I'm excited to go back and listen again. I mean, so many of the references and ideas that you're drawing on, I had no idea. So I can't wait to go and listen to it more deeply. It's really cool.
Great. Yeah, I often use little quotation ideas or symbolic numerologic things or other things just as a starting point. It's sort of like you come up with a motive and then you can turn it into a theme. You can do variations on it. You can improvise on it. And that's usually how I start out my composing process.
Interesting. There's a playfulness and I mean, sort of juxtaposed with the subject matter of Tombow and Rainbow, there's a playfulness to the writing there. And also I think in the symphony you sent me, that I think I understand much more. I mean, given how you've described your process and starting from these quotations and things. Again, that playfulness is a part of what's kind of an amazing complexity to what you're doing. Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. So what projects or compositions are you working on now, or are you excited about working on next?
Well, I finished a song cycle based on the Me Too movement. So it's original text that's all dealing with women as victims of sexual violence and domestic violence. And it's for soprano, horn, marimba, and guitar. And I was going to have it on a recital at Scholastica this past January. So we had a snowstorm, so it got canceled. And then it was rescheduled for March, and then the COVID stuff happened. So maybe next fall. My hope was, besides in town up here, to maybe do it down in the Twin Cities at St. Thomas or one of the other colleges down there. And then there's this German couple I write for. They're mandolin and guitar, and they've had me write a number of pieces over the years. But most recently, they're doing a suite of miniatures based on a collection of paintings or drawings by Goya called Los Caprichos. And what they wanted to do is have it be a suite of a whole bunch of miniatures based on each picture and have a different composer for each one. So I got Bravissimo, which is a chimpanzee holding a guitar backwards and playing in front of a jackass and some people. And all of the pictures are sort of like political cartoons. So that was fun, but they can't play either. Maybe they'll do a YouTube thing this summer, but I don't know. And last summer, a very dear composer friend of mine died. And getting verklempt about that. His last work was a song cycle for soprano and keyboard, and he was planning on orchestrating it with string orchestra for the chamber orchestra that we both have been affiliated with. So I offered to do the orchestration because he didn't get that far, but the song cycle is complete. And I don't think that'll happen this summer either, but it was supposed to be July or August, and I suspect it'll be next summer. Not really composing, just orchestrating it to honor him. Though I might sneak in a little offstage bassoon part because that's what he played. And there's a college friend that has some text that has asked me to set an opportunity to perform them for anything, just baritone and guitar pieces. Otherwise, I'm open to commissions. And I have plenty of pieces I know I want to do. It's a matter of, well, even just getting things performed now is such a question mark. It's been very frustrating. I mean, I find joy in just the writing, but it's like, I want to share this story. I don't want to just do it in my living room.
Indeed. Well, it is certainly a very uncertain time, and I hope that this interview is a small way to bring some more people to your music.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, and like I said, we really look forward to the opportunity to perform Tombow and Rainbow sometime soon, and hopefully some of your other works as well.
Great.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for your time, Mina. It's great to finally meet you virtually, and I know that I know that our musicians and our audience will enjoy this as well.
Cool.
Yeah, you take care.
You too.